Thanks, guys. We've got Grace Sharkey back once again today, but we're talking a little bit different than what we broke down in the first hour. Grace is also one of our co-hosts of one of our podcasts, Transmission, up here on FreightWaves TV. Grace, talk us a little bit about what Transmission is and what it's like working with Sebastian Blanco.
Yeah, so Transmission is a podcast that focuses on the supply chain around the automobile industry, right? So how not necessarily every little piece. Maybe viewers, if you've seen Truck Talk or listened to Truck Talk, it's not so much on the mechanic side as it is more of the supply chains behind the mechanic side of things. So I've really enjoyed it because from my past, I moved a lot of tier one, tier two, different supplies to OEMs. So I have an idea of how difficult that can be, especially on the carriers. And then Sebastian knows everything there is to know about automobiles and the parts and pieces within them and different technologies that are coming out and a lot of the context within the industry. So we have a really nice dynamic. And fun fact, he's actually the closest person to me of everyone I know at FreightWaves. He's like 10, 15 minutes from me. So it's nice to have that too. So it's really enjoyable, and it's nice to be able to dive into really the actual parts and pieces that Andrew just talked about when it comes to like semiconductors and really the areas of different communities and different people that are affected by the auto suppliers and just even a change from uh, diesel to EV and things of that nature. So it's really interesting and an area of supply chain. I think that is sometimes overlooked as something a little bit more difficult.
Grace, I'm glad you spoke to the people that are affected. I don't know if you've ever seen the percentage. I'm sure you know this, being in Michigan. I also want to say how great it is to have both of our people working on Transmission, working on the supply chains for automobiles. They're both there in Michigan, so that's good to
Yes.
have. But it's also, I think, 25% of Michigan's workforce is in the automotive industry. That is what Michigan is about, is the automotive. So there's a lot of people affected by this there in Michigan. Talk to me about this shortage, though, because this is the biggest story across the automotive supply chain, is this semiconductor shortage. Is there any progress? Are there things to look forward to on some supply coming in the back half of the year? We've seen every automotive manufacturer dealing with this shortage.
I think what's really interesting is it's not so much of a crisis as I think sometimes people make it out to be. It's almost more of like this bullwhip effect, where it really hit at such a bad time. And of course, if we saw the pandemic coming, I think people have made different decisions and their suppliers in order to evade this problem. But what's really great is to see that many suppliers, including like Toyota, who we talked to last week, are on top of making sure that they are becoming more resilient and that they are dug into the electric vehicle change and what consumers want. So, what I think is very interesting is that I think sometimes just mainstream media focuses on this as this is like something that's detrimental and can't be fixed. But it's really great to talk to a lot of individuals who are saying, okay, no, we do have plans. We are making sure that we have a better supply for the future. And on this week's episode was really great because we got to talk a little bit more about building that infrastructure here in the United States. And I'm glad that you touched on it, Andrew, because it does really affect Michigan. It affected my family. My father went through layoff situations with the automobile industry in the past. And it definitely affected Detroit, especially in the 70s and various times throughout the 90s as well. And I have a lot of family and friends in the Detroit area. So it's really great to start seeing, especially when we look at like Factory Zero and Ford and GM and the different investments that they're making in EVs. They're attractive jobs. People do want them. And Michiganders, it's something that we've always just kind of like wanted to own and wanted to really take a part of in the automobile industry. So, this week's episode, we dove a lot more into the community effect and how these different companies are starting to invest in EV production throughout the United States and how that's going to affect different areas of the country as well.
Grace, so you guys talked a lot about this week about how electric vehicles and developing that technology here in the United States is crucial to economic development and bringing jobs to it here. Talk to us really, really quickly about the competition that we see in Mexico with so many people going to create electric vehicles across the border and how they can bring those jobs here instead of pushing them down into Mexico.
Yeah, so I think that Mexico is always a go-to, especially when you want to look at cheaper labor. But there's always issues when it comes to clearly like shipping in and out of Mexico and the infrastructure of Mexico as a whole. I think, especially if our viewers listen to this week's episode, you can find that a lot of this production can be done here in the United States, at least domestically or in North America as well. So I think there's huge steps that the administration is already making towards fulfilling that dream and making sure that we're investing in that technology, especially when you look at Illinois and really the resurgence here in Detroit. So I think that, we will always rely on Mexico in some type of way when it comes to auto manufacturing. And clearly, different rail mergers that are coming up is going to affect that as well. But it's always good to make sure that we're continuing to invest in those jobs here in the U.S. I think there's over 4 or 5 million jobs here in the U.S. that rely on the auto industry. And it's always built up towns and built up neighborhoods around it, wherever we place those different tier suppliers and different OEMs. So I'm excited to see from this administration what steps we take to solidify that more here at home.
Yeah, Grace, you're exactly right. I'm sure you know this as well. If you look back at Flint, Michigan, back in the 80s or the 70s and 80s, it was the highest net income of any city in the entire country because of the factories there, because of the community that was built around the automotive industry. So I'm hoping to see that more, and I'm hoping to see that this technology gets expanded outside of Silicon Valley into some of the middle of the country. So thank you so much, Grace, for your time. We'll be seeing more of you soon.